Join us, Simon and Emma, as we interview the greatest expert, Barrie Schwortz of Shroud.com, regarding the Shroud of Turin. The crucifixion is the most significant event in the history of man, when God's Son Jesus Christ died so that we may be saved. Since that day, people have struggled to prove to themselves and others that the events described in the Bible really happened. Yet there remains only one real piece of concrete physical evidence for us to look to in order to discover the true face of Jesus. The Shroud of Turin is said to be the burial cloth of Jesus, and it is at once the most controversial and talked about artefact on the planet. Analysed for hundreds of years by scholars and scientists, many believe that the shroud holds the key to proving once and for all that Jesus died for our sins, just as described in the Bible.
Hello, Barrie.
First of all, I am your friend.
Exactly.
We have a history. We go back for years now. Secondly, and maybe more importantly, is to recognize that, look, I'm nobody special. I hear this, they see me on television. People have this false impression when they see you on television. But I do not consider myself any form of celebrity. I'm a spokesman for the science on the Shroud. I'm just a regular guy. I'm nobody. I don't proclaim myself to be an expert or a scientist, but someone who's studied this very intently for 35 years. And so that gives me the ability to speak to the issues of the Shroud and related subject. But I'm just a regular guy. I mean, I'm nobody. It's one of the great things about living out here. I'm just a neighbor to my neighbors. Even though they've all seen me on television too, and I'm sure that has some influence on it. But considering that I spent most of my life behind the camera, to me, none of this is anything big deal or special. Yeah. It's just part of what I do to educate people. So take a deep breath, Simon, and relax, because all the burden is on me anyway.
Well, Barrie, our niece came round and she came into Simon's office and he showed her a picture of the Shroud of Turin. And first of all, she didn't know what it was, but when she looked, she asked what the marks were on the body. And Simon explained to her that they were the stripes of Jesus Christ. They were where he was whipped.
Barrie, I have a lot of people who come to our home, such as family and friends. Very often I've shown them a picture of the Shroud of Turin, and to my surprise, they haven't got a clue what it is.
It's true. Matter of fact, in my travels, I am frequently, on an airplane somewhere, and people will inevitably ask, "Oh, well, why are you traveling to Zurich or wherever?"
Yeah.
And so I always answer the same way, "Well, I'm going there to lecture." And they say, "Really? What do you lecture on?" And then I always answer the Shroud of Turin. And I get two primary responses. The first response is, "What's that? Never heard of it."
That's
And the second most frequent response is, "The Shroud of Turin, I thought they proved that was a fake years ago."
yes. Barrie, we would like to go back in time, just under 2,000 years ago, right after Jesus was crucified, so we can help people understand the story. We go to the Gospel of Matthew 27.
Christians believe that Jesus was crucified at a place called Golgotha, outside the walls of Jerusalem, on Good Friday.
They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There they offered Jesus wine to drink, mixed with gall. But after tasting it, he refused to drink it. When they had crucified him, they divided up his clothes by casting lots. And sitting down, they kept watch over him there. From the 6th hour until the 9th hour, darkness came over all the land. And when Jesus had cried out again in a loud voice, he gave up his spirit. As evening approached, there came a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph, who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body, and Pilate ordered that it be given to him. Joseph took the body, wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own new tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance to the tomb and went away.
Early on Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been taken away from the entrance. She went running to Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved.
They have taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him.
Then Peter and the other disciple went to the tomb. The two of them were running, But the other disciple ran faster than Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent over and saw the linen cloths, but he did not go in. Behind him came Simon Peter, and he went straight into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the cloth which had been around Jesus' head. It was not lying with the linen cloths, but was rolled up by itself. Then the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went in. He saw and believed.
Barrie, were there two cloths discovered that were used to bury Jesus, as stated in the Bible?
Absolutely. I'm actually glad you brought it up, because several things that you mentioned from Scripture there have created confusion and even doubt in the mind of many Christians as to whether or not the shroud could be authentic. First of all, it is not only Jewish custom, but probably going back all the way to pagan times, that we always cover the face of the dead. We've been doing that as long as man has been on this planet, probably. It's still custom today. Most cultures of the world will do the exact same thing. They will cover the face of the dead with a face cloth or a head wrap cloth, just to out of courtesy or decency to do so. So obviously, when Jesus was taken down from the cross, the first thing they did was cover his head because he was dead. When they took him to the tomb, they removed that face cloth, which was soaked with his blood and fluids, and it is Jewish burial custom and law that a blood-soaked cloth must be buried with the body. Even in Israel, after a terror attack, you'll see righteous men sopping up the blood of those who've been killed and keeping those cloths with the body so they could be buried with the body, which is Jewish law. Now, of course, also, once that cloth was folded and kept separate, it had to remain in the tomb to be buried with the body. The other issue that people are often confused about are the strips of linen. Many people believe that the strips themselves would have been wrapped around the body like an Egyptian mummy, which of course is not the case at all. That is not Jewish burial custom. Jewish burial custom is a long linen sheet like the shroud itself. Now, if you've seen the very famous Della Rivera painting of how the cloth would have wrapped the body was bound into this linen cloth, and the strips were used to keep the body within the shroud if the body had to be moved at all. So the linen strips do not imply that the man was wrapped like an Egyptian mummy. They were simply to hold the body within the shroud itself. The second cloth, the face cloth, which was also in the tomb, as you read from the Gospel, would had to have stayed in the tomb. However, obviously, when the tomb was open, the body was gone. Both cloths disappeared. The second cloth, the face cloth, shows up in Spain in the 7th century, where it has remained ever since. It is known as the Sudarium of Oviedo because it is kept in Oviedo, Spain. Last year, I was given the great privilege of not only going to Oviedo, but for them to open the reliquary and actually show me the Sudarium. So I was greatly honored by that great privilege, because normally it's only shown 3 days during a year on special feast days. So I was given that great honor and privilege to actually see the Sudarium itself. Of all the other Christian relics that are out there, I believe the shroud is the most viable and the Sudarium the second most viable. And that's why we've devoted a considerable amount of space on our website on shroud.com to discussions and information about the Sudarium itself.
Barrie, why does the Bible state that Jesus was wrapped with strips of linen and not one cloth, like the shroud we have today?
What would you say on that?
Well, I think the problem simply is this, and it's one of the problems I must admit publicly here that I have with the Gospels, is they're subject to errors, not intentional errors, but errors that creep in by translating from Aramaic to Greek, from Greek to Latin, from Latin to English. You know, Aramaic is written without punctuation, without spacing between sentences or paragraphs. So where one chooses during the translating process to put a space can dramatically alter the meaning of the passage in question. Yeah. So I think one of the problems we have to be careful of is looking at how, for example, strips even come into play in this case. But I think that we're all victim to what I call the King Tut syndrome. Jews, even to this day, are still buried in basically the same manner. When my father passed away in 2003, his body was placed in a linen shroud, very much like the shroud. The only difference was that it was sewn along the edges so that it was like a sack that his body was placed into. So it would be less need for strips because the body would stay within this. It was already bound at the edges. But otherwise, it's basically the same custom that dates back to before the 1st century.
Barrie, in the books of Exodus, Deuteronomy and Leviticus 26, God states, "Ye shall make you no idols nor graven images." So why would God break his own laws?
Yeah, first of all, being Jewish, the Jews have a long history of experience with graven images. We had a golden calf that cost us about 40 years in the desert, if I'm not mistaken. One of the biggest problems with the shroud is that it violates 2 Jewish laws right away. The first law is that it is a blood-soaked cloth, and so by Jewish law it must be placed in the tomb with the body when it's buried. The second one, of course, is that it bears an image of the man that it wrapped. Well, that's 2 reasons right away why when the disciples found the shroud, they could not come running out of the tomb saying, "Look what we found," because it would immediately make them guilty of violating 2 Jewish laws, and so they might have been the next ones put on a cross. So obviously it had to be kept a secret. There were iconoclasts in the 1st century that were looking for any Christian-related objects to destroy them, and consequently, when they found the shroud, they could not very well reveal that they had found it. Remember, the disciples were all Jews. They knew the rules. They knew that a blood-soaked cloth, especially one that bore an image, was a violation of Jewish law. One of the things that I explain frequently, particularly to my evangelical friends, because they're very skeptical of the shroud, yes, this would be a graven image if it were made by the hand of a man.
Yes.
The Shroud of Turin image was formed by some interaction between the cloth and the body it covered. No hands were involved. It is not an artwork, as so many skeptics like to claim. There's no evidence of any paint, pigments, dyes, or anything else on the cloth to indicate it was man-made or made by the hand of a man. And a graven image is an image made by man of God.
Yes.
This cloth was not made that way, so it violates no Christian ethic, or for that matter, Jewish law.
Excellent. I always say that to people. God made it and not man. Absolutely.
Can I say, look, modern science to this day hasn't been able to determine a mechanism that can create an image with those. So in summation of that last point, the shroud itself is not manufactured by the hand of a man. The image was not made by the hand of a man. So consequently, it violates no commandment, nor is it an affront to Christians. My evangelical friends use that often as an excuse to say that this is a violation of God's law, but look, man can't figure out how the image on this cloth was formed. This isn't something that is a man-made image. And that has been proven in the scientific literature time and again, even though people sort of bring up that issue every single time. The skeptics they don't have much other ammunition, so they use what they have.
People often say to me, God wouldn't break his own law by making an image. What would you say to that?
Well, wait a minute. God said that man cannot create images of God. He never said that he couldn't.
Yeah.
It's it's God's rule that, and he commanded the Jews not to make graven images. As a matter of fact, it's still to this day against Jewish and Muslim law to create graven images. I believe it was in about the 900s when the Orthodox Church began to create icons, which in effect technically are graven images, but this was permitted both within the Orthodox and within the Catholic Church, so that they do have, for example, a crucifix with a corpus on it, where in a Protestant church, Church of England, you will not find a corpus on the cross because they consider that a graven image. So this whole issue of graven images primarily was a commandment to the Jews because of their golden calf.
Yeah.
But the shroud does not fall into that category because man did not create the image on the cloth.
Barrie, another question that obviously a lot of our Christian friends, when we talk to them and we talk to them about the shroud, is they say that there's no way that it can be true because it's in the hands of Roman Catholics. And if it was true, it wouldn't be. Can you shed some more light on that?
Okay, I often, when I speak with non-Catholic Christian groups, I detect a somewhat of an anti-Catholic bias regarding the shroud. They seem to believe that, well, because the Catholic Church has it, then it's just another one of the multitude of relics the Catholic Church has had, created, discovered over the centuries. The ironic part of that is that the Catholic Church has only owned the shroud since 1985.
Excellent.
And prior to that, it was in the hands of the Savoy family, the monarchy, the ruling monarchy of Italy until 1946. So during the period of time where the Savoy family owned it 550 to 600 years, they allowed the church to be the custodians of it, but the king and the Savoy family were the legal owners of the shroud. 1983, when King Umberto II died, he left the shroud to the living Pope, not to the Catholic Church as an institution, but to the living Pope, because I think the king was wise enough to understand that one man could make viable decisions about the shroud, but a college of cardinals would take forever before any decision could be made. So I think the king, in his wisdom, did the right thing by leaving it to whoever the living pope was at any given moment in history. So, but it is not just a Catholic relic, because it's only come into the hands of the church in 1985, which isn't very long ago.
No. Isaiah 50 verse 6 states, I offered my back to those who beat me, my cheeks to those who pulled out my beard. I did not hide my face from mocking and spitting. Barrie, does the Shroud of Turin show any facial hair missing?
Often skeptical Christians will say to me that it says in Isaiah that they plucked his beard, and the man of the shroud has a beard, so obviously this can't be Jesus. Well, I always point out to those folks that when it says they plucked his beard, it didn't say they gave him a shave. And having a beard of my own, and having on occasion caught a beard hair in a zipper, and had one hair pulled out and tears were brought to my eyes, if you look at the man of the shroud, you'll see there's a split in his beard, as if there's a piece missing. And if somebody had ripped that out of his beard, I assure you that would have been equally as much pain and torture as all the other tortures that were afforded to him. But it never said in the Gospels that they gave him a clean shave. They just said they plucked some of his beard hairs. So I think, again, we fall into this trap of interpretation of what is said and sort of applying that interpretation to our personal beliefs. And fortunately, one has to look at the context of the time in which these events took place. This was the 1st century, not the 21st century. And so the standards and the way things were done and even the way things were said are dramatically different what we're used to today. We cannot apply our 21st century mindset to the 1st century. We have to look at the cultural milieu that they lived in at that moment in time and apply these ideas within that context. And when we do that, we can see that there's nothing about the shroud that violates any of the things in both the Old or the New Testament.
Yes.
It's consistent completely, not only with the prophets from the Old Testament, but with the description of what was done to Jesus in the New Testament, in the four Gospels. And every wound that's described in the Gospels that was done, every torture that was applied, are documented with forensic accuracy on the shroud. So how can someone not accept that when forensic science is basically a 20th century invention, and in the first century no one had a clue to these things? So there's no way that either a medieval artist or anyone in between could have created this with the level of forensic accuracy and expertise that's shown on the shroud. The only way that could happen is if the cloth was wrapped around the body. That's the only way it could happen.
Even today, scientists are coming forward and saying it's impossible to create a 3D image that even NASA cannot produce, even today.
That's true. One of the unique properties of the shroud's image is that encoded within the lights and darks of the image are spatial or depth information like a topographical map. We don't know how to, you can't do that with a camera. You can't do that as an artwork unless maybe you're using the shroud as your point of reference. Some of the modern folks have duplicated some of those images now using other means, but no one in all the years that I've been involved, 35 or so, no one has created an image with the same chemistry and physics as the image on the Shroud of Turin. Every effort has been made, and I get to see most of them. Often the skeptics will come to me for shroud photographs. Not only does the shroud have this topographical information built into the density of the image itself, the lights and darks of the image, there are so many properties of this image that is probably the most difficult to reproduce. And with every effort made by all the skeptics, often using my own photographs of the shroud, people can make something that looks like the shroud, but it doesn't pass the chemistry or the physics test. And if you're going to tell me this is how it was done, then you must create a result with the same chemistry and physics that we find on the Shroud of Turin.
Definitely. Barrie, why would you go against your own faith to prove that the shroud is the genuine burial cloth of Jesus Christ?
Well, proving that this cloth wrapped Jesus doesn't go against any religion, really. Certainly doesn't violate anything in Judaism that I'm aware of. I mean, Judaism, like many faiths, are concerned with the truth. People ask me the question, of course, all the time. So to answer the question, what's a nice Jewish boy like me doing involved with the most important relic of Christianity? I often tell my audiences that it's funny how God always seems to pick a Jew to be the messenger. And I see myself simply as one bringing the truth about a piece of cloth to the world. The meaning of the shroud is not written on that cloth. The answer to faith is not found on a sheet of linen. It's found in the eyes and the hearts of those who look upon it. So the responsibility is still up to the individual, not to me or to you to tell people what to believe. Each of us has to open our own heart to God. And so the shroud may be a guidepost. It may be something, if nothing else, that verifies the story of the Gospels with forensic evidence. And we have all the evidence that documents exactly what is told us in the Gospels was done to this man. And so as a human being, one has to feel an affinity for Jesus. Whether or not you're a Christian doesn't really matter. This is a man who so believed in his heart of what he was doing that he was willing to suffer a horrible death for his beliefs. Yes. And as a human being, how can you not love that man, whether you're Christian, Muslim, or Jew?
Exactly. And actually, Barrie, that goes on to what I was just going to ask you, is obviously Simon and I speak to loads of people about the shroud, just like you must do, and I just feel that unless somebody's got an open mind and they're prepared to look at this openly, they will always find fault in scripture, in the shroud, in anything you say. If they do not want to believe and they've got closed minds, they will never see the truth here. They will never understand.
To answer that question, look, the evidence is there. It's there for anyone who's willing to look at it. But once people have made up their minds, I think it's human nature. Doesn't matter what evidence you present.
Yes.
Doesn't matter how powerful the evidence. In the end, once people have made up their minds, there's no easy way to change people's minds. I had a gentleman come up to me after one of my lectures. Told me it was a great lecture, but that I would never convince him. And I looked him right in the eye and said, "What makes you think I even care what you believe?" And he was shocked, and his mouth and his eyes went wide. I said, "Listen, that's between you and God. Take it up with him."
Excellent, excellent.
Brilliant.
Okay, I think that when you look at the Shroud of Turin and the Sudarium together, you find basically documentation of everything that the Gospels tell us occurred to Jesus at that point in his life. And so I can accept that. My mother once said that, of course, the shroud was authentic. And remember, this is a little Jewish lady born in Poland, not well educated. She said, of course, the shroud's authentic. If it had belonged to anyone else, no one would care and they wouldn't have kept it. I consider that Jewish mother wisdom. And I think that, look, each of us has to find that in our own hearts. And the shroud is perfectly great evidence to support these beliefs. But, you know, you can lead a horse to water. But beyond that, it's up to each of us to open our own hearts to God. And a piece of cloth necessarily won't do that.
No. And that's exactly well said.
It's just part of what we know. And, you know, a lot of people ask me why I haven't become a Christian because of my belief in the authenticity of the shroud. And I said, look, I didn't choose myself for this work. I was chosen to do this work. And if it's good enough for God to have a Jew be the messenger for him, then it's good. Should be good enough for everyone. But no, I think that, look, it's great to work with you on this. I know that we come from somewhat different points of view, but I think finding the common ground with the shroud becomes more essential than anything else, so that people stop thinking that, oh, well, this is just a Catholic thing. No, it's a human thing. It's not reserved for any particular religion. I think it's there to show people what this man suffered, to verify what was in the Gospels. And like I said earlier, for me, I am honored to have been given a task, to have been chosen, to be given this important task of educating people and telling them the truth. My job is not difficult. Telling the truth is easy. If God had said to me, go out there and make up any story you can to convince people the shroud's authentic, I would have failed miserably. But the truth is easy.
Yes.
And all I'm doing is giving people access to what we truly know. But as we say on our website, given the facts, you have to make up your own mind. I say that frequently, that all the skeptics always turn out to be Christians.
I know, it's crazy. I mean, there should be support in it that proves that Jesus was crucified and resurrected. There should be, yet they don't.
Look, even my Jewish friends are more open to the shroud than some of my Christian friends. My Jewish friends have said, well, you studied it scientifically for 35 years. Are you convinced? Absolutely. Good enough. That they accept it.
I know.
Because it doesn't have any negative repercussions.
No.
It's not anything bad. I mean, when you get down to it, it's a Jewish man in a Jewish burial shroud in Gospels written
Do you believe me? Says Jesus. For those who choose to follow the way will one day find they went the perfect way, because they chose to believe Jesus. When he said, I am the way, you believed me. So now you're here to stay in the light that shines on you in every way.